Good afternoon. I'm Sunny Masai Giles, CEO of the Houston Defender Network, and I want to welcome you to the State of Black. The State of Black is a series of virtual events focused on you. State of Black women, State of Black men, State of Black business, State of Black millennials, the State of Black. And we're unveiling a three-part series this time with the first focus on the State of Black Houston. This focus actually entails three components, which is the State of Black Houston, the State of Black Harris County, and the State of Black Texas. With that, we're honored to present this first edition, which is the State of Black Houston, brought to you by the Houston Defender Network, Houston's leading Black information source. And today, the community has the opportunity to ask the mayor of Houston the questions that are most relevant to us. We're fortunate to have corporate sponsors who are underwriting this project, and we want to acknowledge and express our gratitude. They are title sponsor, HEB, presenting sponsor, Chevron, and our VIP sponsors, Amegy Bank and Cadence Bank. And now for a message from our sponsors.
Hi, I'm James Harris, Director of Diversity and Inclusion and Supplier Diversity at HEB. HEB has a long-standing history of supporting organizations which focus on social, economic, educational, and voter reformation, which is why we support organizations such as the Houston Area Urban League, the NAACP, and UNCF. We want to especially thank the Houston Defender for bringing this great topic to focus, which is the State of Black. Thank you for allowing us to be a sponsor, and we hope that you enjoy the series. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lee Jordan, Chief Diversity Officer at Chevron. Election campaigning, a global pandemic, and civil unrest have created unprecedented dynamics across the U.S. It's more important than ever that we face and address the systemic racism and discrimination that denies African Americans equal access to opportunities for advancement and recognizes the role of diversity and inclusion in our everyday lives. Chevron has an enduring legacy of valuing diversity and inclusion and is making a $15 million investment to support the Black community aimed at addressing barriers to equity. This commitment aligns with our goal to improve lives, create opportunity, and power the world forward. Local partnership is key to our success in achieving this goal, helping us to better understand and identify local needs and invest in solutions and programs that will deliver measurable and lasting results. Here in Houston, we've invested more than $1.6 million over the last 3 years with organizations that promote, empower, and inform diversity, inclusion, and equality initiatives, and more than half of this investment has focused on the African American community in our region. We're a proud member of the Houston community and proud to support programs that enable all Houstonians to reach their full potential. Thank you.
I want to thank our sponsors, both James Harris from HEB and Lee Jordan from Chevron, for their service and commitment to the Black community. And I want to applaud the corporations for having the insight and foresight to hire these two brothers. So, as part of our program, we're excited to have 6 community partner organizations that serve as the cornerstones in our city and will play a strategic role today in offering some of the questions for the mayor. They are the NAACP Houston branch, the Houston Area Urban League, the Greater Houston Black Chamber, the Top Ladies of Distinction, the Houston Metropolitan Baptist Ministers Alliance, and the National Panhellenic Council of Houston. We want to thank all of them for participating in the State of Black series. And I want to thank you for joining us today in the middle of the day. We have a couple of quick polls we'd like you to take at this time so we can get to know you better. And that way, while I am introducing our guests, if you'll take a second to just answer these 4 quick questions, it'll give us some insight into who you are who have joined us today. Now it's time for our program to get started. And with that, I have the honor. Although his first name may start with an S, it is not hard to acknowledge that the S could also stand for Superman. During his tenure, he dealt with the pension issue. Other mayors have kicked down the can down the street for decades. He's balanced the budget and taking on the firefighters' challenge. He's dealt with Houston's regular flooding issues, Hurricane Harvey, the big comeback, and now the coronavirus. It gives me great pleasure to bring to the stage Superman, better known as Sylvester Turner, the 62nd mayor of the city of Houston. Mayor Turner, we welcome you to the Defender State of Black Houston.
Thank you, Sonny. And it's good to be with you again, and Houston Defender. And I thank you for a very gracious introduction.
Well, with some of the things you've been handling, Mayor, you are very close to being called Superman, brother, because you are handling doing some heavy lifting. If you still see your poll on the screen, just click at the close, and I want to give you, Mayor, and also the audience, a kind of quick overview of how this program is going to work. Our community partners have pre-recorded questions, and I'll ask you questions that we receive from the audience. So audience, attention. This is where you are supposed to put your questions into the chat, which is on the right-hand side. And that way we will try to get to your questions. Now, let's be real. We will not be able to get to everyone's question, but we will try to cover as much territory as we can. And with that, we're going to jump in right now, Mayor. Mayor, our first set of questions comes from our community partners. And the first one, we had a set of questions that were centered around police. And so with that, the first question comes from the top ladies of distinction.
We have all heard the demand from protesters and from civic-minded citizens to, quote, defund the police. Research shows that most citizens do not want us to defund the police, as we know that we need law enforcement in our community. However, with the recent increase in persons who are mentally ill being shot and killed by the police, there seems to be a need for more sensitivity and more training for police officers in handling these difficult situations. The general fund budget for HPD is $931 million, and the total budget is $1.5 billion. With that much capital on hand, Mayor, would you support a reallocation of funds, not a defund, a reallocation of funds to form a police unit composed of social workers, counselors, and mental health professionals to hopefully de-escalate these types of situations and maybe save some lives?
Thank you. And let me thank the top ladies of distinction. And let me just say this, within that $931 million, it bodies our crisis intervention programs. The Mayor's Task Force on Policing just issued their report on yesterday. And they itemize the spending, not necessarily spending, but the programs, the initiatives within the police department. I would encourage everyone to read that roughly 150-page report. So within that 931, there is our crisis intervention programs. What we are finding, and I agree, is that we need to expand our crisis intervention programs such that it's 24/7. We need to make sure that we have more specialized, non-classified staffing, such that when we are encountering people with mental behavioral health issues, homelessness, domestic violence situations, that it's not just the police that are showing up on those calls, but the people who are specialized in those particular areas that can assist. So it's not about defunding. It is even about adding the necessary resources to meet those particular needs. The other thing that I would say is that when I hear people say defunding, I think what they're also saying is that we need to invest in these communities and neighborhoods that have been underserved and under-resourced. And since I have become mayor, prior to the murder of George Floyd himself, that's been my focus since I came in nearly 5 years ago.
I know, Mayor, that part of that question related to mental health, and I know Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and yourself had a press conference recently. You want to share
Yes.
with our audience how that related to the police department, but also to COVID and some of the other mental challenges?
Yes. And what we are finding is that with this COVID and everything else that people having to deal with, being laid off from their jobs, furloughed, you name it, that there are a lot of mental and emotional pressures that are taking place. Starting as of today, there's a special hotline for mental health that people can call. It is 7 days a week from 1 p.m. to 11 p.m. And I'll get that number so I can give it to you, Sonny, before I leave. But that is the mental health hotline that we have stood up through our health department. We've put about $350,000 CARES dollars into that program. It starts today and will go through December. And hopefully we can even extend it beyond that. But that is specifically related to mental health. At the same time, we've had, through my Health Equity Response Task Force, we've held a couple of sessions, even virtual meetings, where the focus has been specifically on mental and emotional well-being. And there are a couple of more that are planned in the next couple of months. But there is no question that we need more emphasis, more training, more resources spent on crisis intervention. And I can assure you that is something we intend to do.
Now that police issue, Mayor, also drew the attention of a couple of more of our partners. Those two partners were the National Panhellenic Council of Houston, okay, and the Baptist Ministers. So I want you to hear their questions.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Wanda Anderson, and I'm the president of the National Panhellenic Council Incorporated of Houston. After weeks of demonstrations over the death of George Floyd, the mayor named a 45-member task force on police reform. Our members would like to know what were the conclusions and/or recommendations made by this task force.
Now, Mayor, before you actually answer that question, Bishop James Dixon had a question that had a similar spin, and we thought we should combine these two questions. So listen to his and then respond to both.
Okay.
Mayor Turner, Houston, like the cities, are considering tough police reforms. Those challenges bring political issues and other circumstances to bear. What are some of the toughest reforms that Houston is considering, and what will you do to make sure that your legacy demonstrates a commitment to real police reform?
Let me thank both of them, Sonny, for their questions. I will tell you that the task force report came out on yesterday. It's roughly about 150 pages. There are 104 recommendations that have been made as relates to policing reform. Within that, they identified, and Bishop Dixon asked what are some of the toughest recommendations that have been put forward. I would say that it is calling for a total rehaul of the Independent Police Oversight Board that's currently in existence. And I've already indicated that Independent Police Oversight Board will be recomposed. And they are recommending a hybrid version of like an investigative administrative paid staff, along with community volunteer members, a hybrid combination. That doesn't exist right now, and we're looking at doing just that. It calls for a greater independence in a sense, from HPD. And at the same time, it says that this Independent Police Oversight Board should be allowed to take complaints from the citizens themselves directly from them. And so we're looking at those changes and those recommendations that they have made. The report also talks about what we just talked about, and that's crisis intervention, about expanding the crisis intervention teams. Now, I will tell you, it applauds the crisis intervention teams that HPD currently has, but it says that we need more. It needs to be 24/7. We need to make sure that we have those specialized staffing to go right along with HPD, such that HPD shouldn't be the initial response to many of these social calls or mental behavioral calls. And I agree with that. Now, several of these recommendations are going to be very costly. So it's not a report that's just coming to the mayor and city council. It's also a report that's being given to the city of Houston, because the city has to also be willing to invest in these initiatives that will reform the police department and our way of policing for the better. It's not an indictment of HPD. It recognizes the importance of HPD, but it also recognizes that we can do things substantially, significantly better.
In talking about those relationships, one of the audience questions from Nanette and also Devontae is, how do we cleanse the police department of bad cops and build better relationships between the police department and the community? And what programs are in place to encourage the youth to be in law enforcement?
Well, accountability is critically important in any organization, whether it's police, whether it's fire, whether it's municipal workers, or even in the private and nonprofit sector. So accountability and transparency are critically important. And then what often happens is that the mistakes done by one or two can oftentimes impact everybody else. We have roughly 5,300 police officers, and by and large, they do an incredible job for the city of Houston, covering 640 square miles. But at the same time, when things happen, when they do things, when individuals or others do things that are wrong, we have to call those things and bring attention to it and make sure that we have accountability for those transgressions. I've also signed an executive order already that says that it calls for de-escalation where practical. It says it calls for detailed reporting wherever deadly force is used. It bans the use of chokeholds, for example. It requires officers to intervene when they see another officer doing something wrong or violating policy or law. Those things by executive order are already put in place. But the recommendations that have been made by the task force, when taken as a whole, I think can be very transformational. It can be a plus for the police department of the city of Houston and the police officers, a plus for the people in the city of Houston, and build that sort of trust that has to exist between both police and the community. But the key is accountability, transparency, clarity, so everybody understands what the governing rules are.
One of the questions is, how do you get a copy of that report?
It is online. It is currently online. It was online as of 3 p.m. on yesterday. You can go to the City of Houston website, look under boards and commissions, and then look for the Mayor's Task Force on Police and Reform. And so it is currently online and people can get it. And I would encourage people to get it and read it. I think, Sonny, you know Larry Payne. Larry's the chair of this 45-person committee. Bishop James Dixon, for example, was one of the ones. The head of the Urban League, Judson, was also on that task force. So I would encourage people to read it. I'm reading it myself and going through it. You know, I just received it on Tuesday, so I'm going through it, and I'm going through it with a very open mind. But I will tell you, just based on my quick read, they did an exceptional job. They made some very pragmatic recommendations, and not just for, you know, increasing policing, but also about the well-being of police officers themselves. So it's very balanced, and I'm looking at working with them as we move forward. And that telephone number for that mental health helpline is 713-999-9442. 713-999-9442. 713-999-9442.
Look at you. Okay. Okay, so put that in the chat box if you put one of the staff members. I applaud your Spanish. Okay. Our next question comes from a community partner, the Greater Houston Black Chamber.
Hello, my name is Sharila Wall-Price, and I am Vice President of Business Development at Unity National Bank. Based on several studies done on the effect of racism on Black community, the most devastating effect has been economic. As you know, COVID-19 has negatively affected Blacks at a double the rate of our white counterparts. Mayor, we need to know, what financial mechanism could the City of Houston employ to assist the Black consumer with closing the financial gap that has been widened by COVID-19 pandemic and begin to build generational wealth in our community?
And COVID-19 has had a horrific impact on businesses, and particularly businesses of color. Currently, right now, the City of Houston has approved and put forth a $20 million small business economic development package that is currently out there and available. And I believe over 8,000 small businesses in the City of Houston have signed up. they can get a grant up to $50,000. And these, and you don't have to pay it back, up to $50,000 grant for small businesses. And so we are hopeful that that will take place. At the same time, the city of Houston, is important for us to continue to do business through our procurement process with small businesses and Black businesses and others in particular. And I will tell you, in the last 4 years, the amount of business that the city of Houston is doing with Black businesses, that number has increased. In 2017, it was over 41 million. In 2018, it was over 101 million. In 2019, it was 123 million. And just recently in 2020, that number to doing business with Black businesses, that number is now up above 162 million. And so whatever technical assistance, support services, all of the measures that we can do that can assist Black businesses as well as others. We want to do our very best to keep them open. We want to be supportive of them as much as possible. And we're certainly encouraging the federal government and others to join with us in a collaborative effort in supporting all of our businesses, and in this case, particularly our Black businesses.
Mayor, this question comes from Daniela. Harvey rebuilding funds for Fifth Ward in our neighborhoods is the focus of our question. Status on fund distribution, repairs not done since Ike in 2008 and Harvey 2017. Failure to create sustainable living housing is an environmental injustice. Can you talk to that of where we are and what's next?
Yes, as you can recall, the federal government through HUD authorized about $1.1 billion to be coming to the city of Houston for Harvey repair and reconstruction. That includes not only single family, but multifamily as well. Now, contrary to what many people may believe, the money was not placed in our banking account. They authorized us to get it, but the money was placed with the state. We have to spend the money and then get a reimbursement, okay? But before we can even start building or repairing somebody's home, the state general land office has to sign off on the file. They put us through 77 checks on every single file, 77 checks. And they have to sign, we have to pre-clear before we can move forward on repairing or rebuilding or providing reimbursements. And I will tell you, the program did not start for us until January of 2019. That's last year. Now, bear in mind, Harvey was in August of 2017, but the city was not available to even start its program until January of 2019. So I want to kind of put things in context, specifically as where we are today. In total, 311 families have been assisted through reconstruction. Of that number, 53 through reconstruction, 35 through rehab, 93 for reimbursements, home buyer assistance, 148. Another 375 families are in the process of receiving the above assistance, and an additional 1,000 families are going through what we call the environmental and inspection process right now. So we are moving forward with this program. The money is still available, but it's on the state level. But I will tell you, unfortunately, there is a great deal of tension between the state and the city. And I'll give you another example. If you live let's say you live in Cashmere Gardens and your house flooded, and it's just the mom and the dad that's in their home. Kids have gotten grown, moved out. If that home flooded, the state says that if they had a 3-bedroom home, we can only rebuild them with a 2-bedroom home. Okay?
What?
Yes.
I mean, I know they've been trying to give you a bad reputation of not having spent the money and repaired homes, but it sounds like all this red tape and then the limitations is putting you in a box.
They are saying that even if it was a 3-bedroom home, if the children are gone, for example, and it's only the husband and the wife there, you cannot rebuild, Mayor, that 3-bedroom home. You can only build a 2-bedroom home. Sonny, I vehemently disagree, because not only does it work against that family, it works against that community. So let me tell you what I've authorized. we will take the money that they give us for that 2-bedroom home, and we're adding local dollars to rebuild that 3-bedroom home. That's what we are doing. And that's why we are fighting in part. And that's not HUD's rule. That's the state GLO's rule. Now, to the contrary, there's another home, for example, in Kingwood. And in that particular home, some children, the grandchildren, for example, came in. It was a 4-bedroom home. They came in, and the people want us to build a 7-bedroom home. Well, the state takes the position, well, now they have more children. They had a 4-bedroom home at the time Harvey occurred. They said, well, now there are more kids there. City, build them a 7-bedroom home. I said, hell no, I'm not going to do that. And come to find out, the kids return back to the mother, okay? I am willing to rebuild the 4-bedroom home, but I'm not going to be building people a 7-bedroom home when they only had 4 bedrooms at the time of Harvey. But so what I've said to the state, if you want to build that 7-bedroom home, you build it. But I'm not going to do it when you're not allowing me in Cashmere Gardens or Sunnyside or Acres Home or in these other communities. If they had a 3-bedroom home, and even if there's only one person there, I believe we should restore the home that they had to 3-bedroom home and not a 2-bedroom home where there's not much of a market and you're working against these underserved communities. That's a part of the battle, the issue that we are having with the state. So we are fighting COVID, we are fighting social unrest, and we are fighting the state all at the same time.
Wow, sounds like a lot. That you're earning that Superman piece, I do believe. Other questions that we have that are similar, that we combined 2 different sets of questions, came from the Houston Area Urban League regarding evictions.
Due to the pandemic, 52% of 18 to 29-year-olds have moved back home. Unemployment and lack of affordable housing options has placed an unequal burden on Black families given the current conditions. What are your long-term plans to combat this problem that is becoming more apparent as stimulus programs and eviction moratoriums expire or are ignored?
Now, Mayor, the other part to this question that also focuses on evictions has a similar tone from the National Panhellenic Council. We'll hear that question.
The Public Housing Task Force between the city and the county to address public health by preventing evictions and stabilizing housing in Houston was announced in June. Mayor Turner, recently you announced that the city would be pulling out of the COVID-19 Stability Housing Task Force. The members of the National Panhellenic Council Incorporated of Houston would like to know why you chose to pull out of the task force at this time, and also the plans of the city to continue this effort in the city of Houston.
Okay, good questions, and let me try to
Yeah, you have one that deals with families, with young people moving back home, and then you have the other question of dropping out of the joint effort between the city and county.
And the focus for this administration is to build affordable housing all throughout the city of Houston, because we do need housing, both single family as well as multifamily. Over the next 2 years, the city will spend approximately $350 million for 3,300, that's 3,300 new affordable rental homes that will leverage about $650 million in other funds for over $1 billion in development. Now, these rental homes will be affordable for the next 40 years. This is more affordable home development than any other mayor has overseen, and the first 900 rental homes are already under construction, and more will be going on to construction next week. At the same time, we're trying to make home buying even more affordable. Under my administration, we have doubled the amount of first home buyer assistance from $15,000 to $30,000. And at the same time, we have built on the land acquired by the Houston Land Bank and are actively buying more land for this development. And additionally, we've created opportunities to buy a starter home at a starter home price through the Houston Community Land Trust, which means that a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home sells now for about $75,000. So we put instruments in place to build more affordable homes, and we're doing that in a significant amount. With respect to the task force between the county and the city, the focus has been on, yes, keeping people in their homes, rental assistance, and both the county and the city, for example, is that we have taken federal CARES dollars that we have received, and we put those CARES dollars together in providing cash rental assistance to people who run the risk of being evicted. And what the city, what we've done as well, is that we have said to landlords who want to participate in this cash rental assistance, if one of your tenants gets cash rental assistance, then the landlords, you can't evict anybody at that apartment complex. So for example, if there's an apartment complex of 100 tenants, and if one of those tenants receive rental assistance, the landlord agrees not to evict anyone there. And we have had thousands of landlords who have entered into that agreement with Baker Ripley. The city and the county combined have put forth a cash rental program of about $60 million, okay? And that is helping out a number of people. And I will tell you that there is still dollars available. We're asking people now to sign up for the program because all of the dollars have not been expended. At the same time, for those tenants where the landlords did not agree to sign up for this program, we have asked those tenants to also sign up through a separate portal at Baker Ripley. And then we're working to provide cash rental assistance for them as well. And this is where I come from. You can put in place a moratorium, but 3, 4, 5 months down the road, unless the feds are giving more money or somebody's providing you some money, your hole is so much bigger and it's still a train wreck ready to occur. So what would you prefer? Would you prefer the cash rental assistance, okay, which reduces your financial obligation, or just a moratorium and the hole gets widened? And so that's where we're focusing. And then recently, last week, the governor, through his money, has authorized $171 million in cash rental assistance. Some of that money will be coming to the city of Houston. The reason why we decided to pull back from the task force, and it's from the structure of the task force, not necessarily from the purposes. Within the city of Houston, on city council, I have a housing committee, and that's run by council member Tiffany Thomas. There is a housing committee where the task force cannot substitute for the housing committee. And these are elected officials. So you can't bypass these elected officials where there's a housing committee and just turn it over to a task force of non-elected officials, and then they're supposed to rule the day. It was creating some confusion. The mission, the emphasis, the objectives remain the same. The county doesn't have a housing committee made up of just commissioners, but the city of Houston does. And so we had accomplished our purposes, and now it was time to go back through the regular order of business of the city council and how we operate, since we have a standing housing committee with a chairperson and other committee members. That was the reason.
Okay, Mayor, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We got a question from JB that says, with the recent legislation push from the governor's suggesting violent protesters be charged as felons, how does the city protect our rights to peaceful protests and make sure peaceful protesters aren't wrongfully accused?
Well, you know, that's the governor and the state. The best way to protect your rights is to go and vote in this upcoming election. Your vote is your voice. And there's an election coming up. And the last day to register is October the 5th, midnight. And so I would encourage people to get registered. And then early voting will be from October the 13th through October the 30th. I would encourage people to either vote by mail or to vote early in person. And you can go to the Toyota Center, BBVA Stadium, NRG, Rice, Texas Southern. It doesn't matter, wherever there's a polling place in Harris County, you can vote regardless of where you live. And then if you miss
still have time to register to vote if you're not registered. So yeah.
And if you're not registered, you have no voice. Okay. So you have until October the 5th. But that's the state, that's the governor, that's what he plans to do. That's not what this mayor is planning to do. Look, I respect people's right to march, demonstrate, and protest. I only ask that you do it peacefully, but you have that right. But we're not out here trying to tell people you can't do it and go against your rights if you do.
Let me go to one of our partner questions. The NAACP question focuses on housing and reveals some interesting facts. Listen up.
Greetings, Mayor Turner. This is Belinda Everett, the Housing Chair and the Branch Secretary for the Houston NAACP. I appreciate the time that you're affording us to ask you these questions. My first question to you is, housing statistics and home ownership statistics in the United States are dismal for minority communities, specifically African American communities. While nationally the numbers are 42%, in Houston the number is 32%, 10% below the national average. With an economy like Houston, how do we turn this number around, and what can you do to change minority, specifically African American home ownership?
And I agree with everything that was just said. And that's one of the reasons why I have placed a great deal of emphasis on building complete communities, investing in communities that have been underserved and under-resourced. And one of the aspects of an incomplete community is the lack of housing, and specifically single-family homes. And so what we are doing is that we are placing emphasis on building and creating and putting in place opportunities for people to be homeowners, single-family homeowners. And that's why we increase the homeowners assistance program from $15,000 to $30,000 under this administration. And that's why we are focused on the community trust arrangement, Houston Community Trust, which means we own the land, but a person will own the house on top of the land, and that helps to reduce the cost of that home significantly, where somebody can really get a house valued at, let's say, over $100,000, maybe able to get it for $75,000. So there are several things that we are trying to do to boost home ownership. We're also talking to financial institutions within the city of Houston and asking them to partner with us in order to put forth affordable products in the city of Houston for home ownership, to put people in the best position to become home owners. So all across the city, whether you're dealing with in Northeast Houston, if you look at, there's a project, for example, in Northeast Houston, hundreds of homes are being built in Northeast Houston for the first time, price points maybe from $150,000 to $200,000 and let's say $20,000. In Sunnyside, working with the Turds, we're looking at building, I want to say, over 1,600 homes in that Sunnyside area. These are single family homes. Looking at doing the same, for example, in Acres Home and some of the other communities. But I agree, your greatest asset in most cases is your home. And the number of African Americans, or the percentage of African Americans owning homes, that percentage has been going down, and we need to work in an intentional way to reverse course and have that arrow going in the opposite direction.
Mayor, we want to thank the more than 300 people who are joining us today. Just a reminder, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. We do have someone looking throughout that chat box to pose the questions that people are putting in there. Let's see. Paula Johnson wants to know, is the city providing financial support to nonprofit organizations that provide emergency shelter for families who've been evicted from their homes?
Let me double check that, because I don't want to misspeak, but I do know that we are encouraging endowments and others to contribute to nonprofits that specifically are meeting the needs of people of color within our community. And I know I've been working with some other entities, organizations, and then back up in Boston, for example, there were 19 Black executives that worked at these major companies, signing in Boston, and they've come together to establish this Black fund in which they are raising dollars and they are taking the dollars, and the goal is to raise up to $100 million. And they themselves will then invest these dollars into like Black nonprofits that otherwise haven't gotten significant help from your normal philanthropic organizations. And we are looking at doing something similar right here in the city of Houston. In fact, I've been meeting with some groups in the last month and a half to do some of the same things, to help to raise dollars and to flow those dollars to other nonprofits that are assisting people in our communities. They're already there, but they're having a hard time getting the resources that they need to meet and they're seeing the needs firsthand. And we need to be able to kind of generate funds that we can flow to them so that they can continue to do the work that they've been doing. They've just been struggling.
Speaking of those that are struggling, the top ladies had a question about the economic stability of our community. I want you to hear what they had to say.
In the Saturday, September 19th edition of the Houston Chronicle, there was a report from the Urban Institute that stated, even though Houston boasts a very diverse population and a low unemployment rate, it's still behind its peers in providing opportunities for economic advancement. 6% of Houston's working households with a member working full-time are still living in poverty, compared to 3% in Austin and 4% in San Antonio. Shortly after you came into office, Mayor, you brought on board the Complete Communities Initiative. Now, we know that change is slow and can be painful, but do we have any metrics from this program that can show us any progress in addressing inequities in poverty, housing, and education in our community?
And thank you, Jackie. And Complete Communities is a very ambitious initiative. And for the first few years, it took us a great deal of time to convince the nonprofits, endowments, the corporate, the business community, exactly what it means. I will tell you, since the death of George Floyd, it has become clearer to individuals and companies and endowments what it means. And that is when people are saying defund police, what I've said to businesses and others, what I am hearing people saying is don't just invest in law enforcement to police and incarcerate people in these communities that have been underserved and where there is high poverty and people don't have access to affordable health care or decent housing or decent parks and green space, and their food deserts. What people are saying, invest in these communities that have been underserved. And if you want to talk about racial equity and social justice, it starts with investing in people in these communities that have been systematically overlooked for decades, way before I became mayor. And so what we are saying in Complete Communities, and what I said when I came into office, is that I want to focus on these communities that have been overlooked in terms of housing, just like we've been talking about with several of the questions that have come forward, in housing opportunities, parks and green space, not just a park with a name on it, but it's not a quality park, but decent parks and green space. There are too many areas in our community, food deserts. You can't tell people to eat healthy and they don't have healthy options. And so we need quality food stores in these communities, economic business job opportunities, quality neighborhood schools, good sound infrastructure. Those are where every community is a community of promise and inspiration and hope. Those are the things that I believe people are asking for. And so you're not going to turn it around overnight. People are just now coming to realize that when you invest in Complete Communities in the areas that I've talked about, you are directly addressing and racial equity and social injustice that exists. Because otherwise, the frustrations will mount, the poverty will increase, illegal dumping takes place in these communities, and people feel as though you have forgotten about us. We are you're treating us like secondhand citizens, and we're not going to take it anymore. So it is not nearly where I would like it to be, but we are moving in an intentional way to say to people, you need to invest in these communities. I am calling on financial institutions like Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, many of these other financial institutions to invest in these neighborhoods. Because when you look at these neighborhoods today, you're not going to hardly find those institutions in these neighborhoods. And if they do exist, they're on the periphery. But let me tell you what you will find in these neighborhoods. You will find these check cashing entities. Those are the financial institutions that are within these neighborhoods that will take a lot out of people's paychecks when they are cashing them, okay? Those are the financial institutions you will have. So when the banks leave, so will the stores, grocery stores, and other entities that are desperately needed in these communities. And if you want to build these communities up, especially the educational systems, then we have to create neighborhoods such that the people will return from Pearland, from Sugarland, from the woodlands, I call them the lands, and come back to the neighborhoods from which many of them were born and reared, but they have now migrated elsewhere.
Speaking
so
of
what I say to them, the diaspora is over, they need to come back home.
Speaking of those neighborhoods, Richard Chappelle and also Bishop James Dixon from the Houston Metropolitan Baptist Ministers Alliance raised an issue that is a concern that we're seeing that connects with what you were talking about.
Okay.
Listen to what that question is. And this will be our final question.
Mayor, Houston is facing the real issue with gentrification. Black and brown communities are being displaced, residents are being moved around the city, and neighborhoods are changing. They don't look like they used to look. What can the faith community do to work with your administration to make sure we preserve the historicity of these neighborhoods so that our legacies won't get lost through gentrification?
And Bishop Dixon, people like yourself and others, your church, Community of Faith, is right there off of Pinemont, right there close to the Acres Home community. We have to work very closely with the faith-based community, people like myself, my administrative and executive team, because you all can readily identify the issues and the concerns that are in those neighborhoods. Many of you have facilities in those communities that we can partner with. In some cases, we don't need to come in and rebuild other things. We can partner with you in addressing the needs within those communities. We have utilized you all for various food mass distributions, you name it. I'm working with a set of ministers, for example, in Northeast Houston that have identified where we can do some development, whether it's building retail or looking at ways to bring in quality food stores in those communities and housing. So there are many ways in which we can partner with you all to work to build these communities and keep people in these communities and attract others to come to these communities.
So Mayor, we're coming down to the final minutes. We want you to have an opportunity to give some closing remarks, but also we've got one final question before you leave.
That?
So just go ahead. You got any closing remarks you want to make?
Look, let me just say this. And Sonny, you said it at the very beginning. In the 5 years that I've been here, we have faced major challenges. 4 months after I arrived, it was the tax day flood. The following year was Harvey. That was in 2017. We've dealt with pensions. That was a problem that has been that the city's been dealing with since 2001. We got that addressed 2 years into my term. And then we faced Tropical Storm Imelda. And this year we faced the coronavirus, the social and civil unrest within our city. We just got through facing Tropical Storm Beta. So there have been many big issues that we have addressed. And at the same time, there were other issues that have been plaguing the city for a long time, like the neglect of many of our communities and neighborhoods that's now fueling to the surface. And I got that. I understand that. And so it's going. We're doing everything we can to be as intentional, to work as quickly as we can with the limited resources. Bear in mind, voters in 2004 imposed a revenue cap on this city. That's almost $1 billion that since 2014 that the city could have utilized, that we have not been able to utilize because of the revenue cap. Having said all of that, we are going to continue to do everything we can to advance this city that will be in the best interest of everyone. We don't want to leave anyone behind. I count it a challenge, a challenge and a blessing to be where I am at this moment in time. And so, I just ask people to work with us as we want to work with people in the city to move this city forward for everyone concerned.
Now, Mayor, we've been dealing with a lot of serious issues, and I'm one of those people who likes to throw a little fun in the game. So we're going to end this by asking one last question. Who is the greatest Black male performing artist of all time?
Oh.
You have 5 choices. And audience, you can weigh in on this in the chat. Marvin Gaye is first. Michael Jackson is second. Prince is third. Luther Vandross is fourth. And Stevie Wonder is fifth. Out of those 5 men, who is the greatest Black male performing artist of all times? For the audience, weigh in the chat box. And Mayor, just to show your personality, why don't you sing a few bars of whatever you think is the winner of this particular race? Who do you think is the greatest?
One look in your eyes, and there I see just what you mean to me. Luther Vandross, here now. Here and now. I promise to love faithfully. You're all I need. Here and now, I vow to be one with thee.
Okay, man. Okay. Well, I think you picked the right career.
Look, and that's my love song to the city of Houston.
Oh, that's so nice. I'm sure the city wants to hug you back. Man, I want to thank you for taking the time. Hey, I will have this, we will be recording this, of course, and people will be able to hear this.
See, Sonny, how you made me act a fool?
Well, now it's on tape, brother. You can't take it back. Mayor Turner, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to participate in the State of Black Houston. I'd like to think that this was a successful program. You shared some very valuable information. We want to remind you, our audience, all 300 and something of you who joined us today, that we do have a program next Thursday in which we're going to be, and last year, you and Lena were on stage. This year, we're doing it separate because we're living in COVID and it's a virtual situation. But the county judge will be with us for the State of Black Harris County. And we want to thank our sponsors, title sponsor HEB, James Harris and Company, Winnell, and a whole lot of other folks, Scott. We want to thank Chevron, our presenting sponsor, with Nicole and also Mr. Jordan, Amegy Bank and Cadence Bank, our VIP sponsors. This virtual series is only possible because of their support. impact of COVID-19 put the Defender on life support, and you stepped up and came to our rescue with donations and contributions that allowed us to continue our 90-year legacy of service to this community. We will be forever grateful. By the way, go to defendernetwork.com and read the latest edition, e-edition, A New Perspective on the Police. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today, and we invite you to join us next week. That's it. Have a good afternoon. Power to the people. Thank you, Mayor.
You're more than welcome.